guys. Welcome back to Sad Dad. My name's Keith Carey, and I am a comedian out of Fresno, California, and this is a podcast where I sit down with my fellow funny friends, my fellow comedians, and we talk about dads. Hi. How are you guys? Coming in hot with this episode. Right now, it's like 11:15 on a Wednesday night. I released this on Thursday, so I gotta jam through this. It's been such a busy week. So many shows. I did a ton of really cool shows this week with my guest today, actually. His name is Keith Carey, and Keith's a guy I really look up to in comedy. He was a big fan of his podcast before I started doing comedy, and then I met the guy, and then we became friends. It was wild. And he just slept in my house for the last 3 nights, and we played the Spider-Man game on PS4, and then Tom Goss, who you guys would know from, I think it was episode 20, I had Tom Goss on. Tom Goss, another member of his podcast, The Mean Boys, came and hung out with us, and it was a ton of fun. My house has been a revolving door of comedians this last week going into the holidays, and it's been a ton of fun, but it has also really put me way behind on all the work I'm supposed to do because I've been hanging out with cool people all week. So when I first started doing Sad Dad, the podcast about dads, one of the first guests I ever had in mind, and one of the first guests I really, really wanted to do the show was Keith Carey. And, if you're a fan of his podcast, you hear so much about his mom. I've always been curious about his dad. And I finally got to make that happen today. And, so yeah, I'm really excited about this episode. I'm not going to do a long intro this week. Next week, I will have Abigail on. I've got a real cool episode coming out next week with a comedian named Tema Saul, and I had a really good chat with her. But enough about all that. Let's focus on today's guest. Let's jump into it, guys. Keith Carey. I always forget that you play guitar.
Yeah, me too.
When did you start playing guitar?
I started when I was like 16.
Really?
Yeah. It was like, or maybe younger than that. Maybe like, I might have been like 13, 14.
Yeah.
But yeah, I played like pretty seriously for a while.
Did you?
Yeah, and then it was just like a thing of, I wasn't ever going to be good enough to do anything with it.
Sure.
So I was like, I'm just done trying.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a fun thing. I don't, I'm like good enough to know what I'm not good at and like how to get better at it if I put in the time, but I also know how much time that would take. So.
Exactly, yeah. And especially once I started comedy, I was like, I'm never going to play the guitar again. Right. Like, what am I going to do? Like, decide to be a rock star after I've devoted years of this?
Totally. And it's a good thing to be mediocre at, too. Like,
yeah, I know enough to pick up a guitar at a party and people go, oh, and then I can do it for about 3 minutes before it becomes clear I don't actually know what I'm doing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. The big problem I had was all my favorite covers to play on guitar were brand new songs.
Oh, you're fucked, dude.
I know. I learned a whole bunch of new emo songs.
Yeah, just reading Lacy Gate, and I'm like, I better see if anybody in Taking Back Sunday molested anybody.
That's so funny. Oh man, what was your first time coming up to Fresno?
The first time I ever came to Fresno was like, God, maybe it was a long time ago. It was because my first headlining gig I ever did was in Visalia.
Oh no shit!
It was a Eulalio Magana show.
Oh, Eulalio,
yeah, before I made his blacklist.
That's funny.
Yeah.
He's blacklisted himself at this point.
Dude, he's such a chode. I have stories, but
sure, I believe it.
But no, I did that, and I was the headliner solely on the merit of I had the coolest picture on Facebook. Because it was some like he was doing like, oh, it's fucking nerd themed comedy, dude. So it's like, we just nerds, bro, just fucking nerds. Everybody's a nerd. And I had a picture of me like lightsaber fighting with Darth Vader on Hollywood Boulevard. So he's like, I guess your headline. And I sucked, but like I got through like 20 minutes, and I was like, I'm a big time city comic. I'm like less than a year in at this point.
Wow.
And I went and I was doing. Danny was running a show at an Indian restaurant.
Yeah.
And I was featuring for not even featuring. We were doing guest spots. Me and a couple other guys from the Nerd Show. Mm-hmm. It was Dean Del Rey was headlining.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
And it was like right around like the rise of Dean Del Rey. When he exploded out of nowhere.
Pretty good credit at the time. Yeah.
But Daniel Eaches was on it too, and I heard this story after the fact. Because I guess Minch comes up to me and he's like, hey man, how much time can you do? And I'm all cocky, and I'm like, oh, I could do like 30 minutes. And I guess Daniel Leach is behind him just going, 7. Like holding his fingers out, just like, give him 7. And Danny goes, I'm gonna give you 7 minutes because we got a lot of comics on the show. I don't want to overwhelm it. And then I bombed my shit off for 7 minutes.
That's great.
And yeah, then I didn't come back for like 4 years.
Oh, that's funny. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but both you and your partner in crime, Connor, have a weird place in like the origin of me doing stand up.
A word?
Yeah. For one, with Connor, the first time I did an open mic, I was thinking about getting into comedy, and I was like, I haven't seen a lot of live comedy, and what's going on? And there was a show that Connor was headlining here in town. It was one of Tony Lay's shows, and I'm like, I'm gonna go check it out. And that was on a Friday, and my ex, she wasn't my ex at the time, but she got blackout drunk. To the point of like, she's like up on stage with Connor, like,
oh my God.
And I had to like escort her out. And
I've seen so many drunk women fall into the Connor web. And he just goes into this glaze like, well, guess I'm dealing with fucking Becky tonight.
Yeah. And so like I got her out of there, and then I was so upset because I was like, this comedy thing is a thing I'm thinking about doing, and you immediately shit on it. And so he was doing Barmageddon that was Friday. Sunday he was headlining a Barmageddon show on that Sunday. I'm like, we're going down to Barmageddon.
Yeah.
And you're apologizing to Connor McSpadden.
Which, ask any human who's ever tried to apologize to Connor McSpadden how that goes.
In fairness to him, he took it really well, and she was very sincerely sorry. So they were both very adult in that situation. But while we were there was an open mic happening afterwards.
Okay.
And I was like, I guess I'll do the open mic. And so
shit, that's the first time you went up?
The first time I went up. And then, funny enough, you, believe it or not, technically introduced me to Danny Minch.
Really?
Yeah, because I saw you were headlining his show, and I was like, I like the Mean Boys podcast. I'm going to go check out that show.
Yeah.
And I came and said hi to you.
Okay.
And we talked for a little bit, and then Danny walked up, and you're like, oh, Danny, this is Dave? And I was like, oh, hey. And
I remember that, actually.
Yeah. And
yeah, oh, shit.
Yeah. So that's like both you and Connor have this weird point in the genesis of me doing comedy.
Sorry, man. Sorry we ruined everything for you.
Oh man, that's great. What was I know we've talked a lot about you doing comedy and just bullshitting out on but like, what was the point where you're like, I'm gonna fucking do an open mic? Like, what was
I was living in Long Beach, and I was living with this girl. It was like sort of a dead end relationship. I was working at Disneyland. It was kind of like, I had wanted to write movies for like the longest time.
Yeah.
And writing anything, like, even now with like a foot in the door in like the industry or whatever, it's still such a fucking, you're just spending hundreds of hours banging your head on the wall, and then no one gives a shit. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. Everything was kind of fucked. And a buddy of mine was hosting an open mic in Long Beach. Yeah. And he's like, oh, come down, come check it out. And I'm like, all right, cool. He's doing stand-up. I had never thought of stand-up as a thing I could do.
Yeah.
And like, people had told me to do it, and I always sort of thought like, nah, I just would rather be like a writer, get like a behind the scenes guy. I'm not like really like a performer person or whatever.
Yeah.
And I went, and I felt bad because I was like, there were like two guys who I thought were super funny, and then everyone else, I'm like, these guys all suck. I could be at least as funny as these guys.
Yeah, right.
And so I like, spent the whole week just like writing down notes and like panicking, and then I went and did my first set the next week, and it was like immediately like, it would be bad now if I listened back, but for like a first set ever, I did fairly well. And like one of the guys I had thought was funny was like, oh, that was really good. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to do this for, like, I immediately just became addicted to
This is the thing that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Were you kind of like a comedy nerd growing up?
I was, yeah. I watched a ton of stand-up. Part of the reason I ended up, like, I do a lot of work with the roast and stuff now is I was obsessed with, like, the Comedy Central roast.
Right.
Those are my favorite things. But, I was a huge comedy nerd.
Yeah.
Coming up, but I had never been to a stand-up show until I started doing stand-up.
Right.
I never thought of it as like, oh, you can go see people do comedy. It's something you watched on TV.
Sure. And like there's, you came up in the OC scene, and there's, for one, it's a pretty sizable scene. There's a lot of real funny people down there, but you seem to really kind of like outpace everybody in a lot of ways. And what was that just like your motivation? Like, was that just like, this is a thing I need to do? Was it like a?
I definitely worked harder than a lot of people. I wouldn't say I outpaced, because if you look at the class of OC comics that came out around I did, they're all doing huge things right now.
Sure.
me, Connor McSpadden, Tom Goss, who is, you know, our third on the podcast, one of the funniest human beings on the earth, and then like Anna Valenzuela, who you've seen on Comedy Central, Ramsey Badawi, who just wrote for that Goat Face thing that was on Comedy Central, Opie, who has written for everything and is like the face of Universal Studios.
Yeah, right.
You know, that it was like a weirdly, I feel like with little scenes, because I've talked to other people from like Denver and Austin, you know, these kind of like tertiary where they're like a big scene, but not a big scene.
Sure.
It goes in waves where there's something in the water for like a 6-month period where everyone who starts just fucking destroys.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the fact that like I was surrounded by people who were also taking it seriously, who were really working on it, and also who gave a shit.
Right.
You know, and who were like really talented to back that up. I think it forced me to be like, well, I don't want to look stupid in front of Connor. You know,
right.
I don't want like, you know, Scott Blacks to make me look bad. Like all these guys who I really looked up to. So I think we all were like really pushing each other, you know.
Yeah.
And like every time you'd start to get like complacent, you'd be like, oh, I'm the king of this tiny little scene. Then all of a sudden it's like, who's Robert Tran? Right. Fucking, you'd have the funniest human being that ever existed now, Robin Tran, just fucking making everyone look stupid, and you had to work even harder.
Ah, that's great, man.
Yeah, it was cool, man. It was a really beautiful like moment in like comedy time, and like I don't know how much of it was like super unique and how much of it was just I was young and bright-eyed and everything seemed wonderful. But like I look at the scene now and I'm like, there's a lot of great people and but it doesn't feel like it's coalesced the way it did then, and I'm hoping it does again at some point.
Sure. Yeah, I know. It's been a little bit of a roller coaster down there lately. I mean, I know there's been some rough stuff happening, and but there's so many cool people down there. I mean, so many cool people that have been on this show. I mean, like my listenership, I feel like is like heard like about the OC scene like ad nauseum, you know, between...
You're going to be like, This Is Rad, where it's like, people are like, I listened to a podcast about dads, and now all of a sudden I'm hearing about like the Harbor House Diner for the 40th time.
Fucking Max Blooms again.
Yeah. Oh, fucking R.I.P., dude. 40 on the curb.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah. But yeah, and so like, you're coming out of the OC. What was the point you're like, I got to get out of this scene. I'm hitting L.A., like...
Yeah, I mean, it happened pretty gradual. Like, I moved up to Long Beach again because I was living in OC when I started comedy. I moved up to Long Beach again. And it was sort of that Long Beach, for anybody who's not like local to the 40 miles I lived in. It's like halfway between Orange County and LA, and it was close enough that I could take the bus up to LA every night and do open mic.
Oh, sure.
And it, you know, I spent like 2-3 years being mostly an OC comic. I would do occasional shows or mics in LA.
Yeah.
But I sort of like, I could get booked in Orange County. I could get longer sets, you know, and I was kind of like known there versus when I went to LA, I was sort of, nobody knew who the fuck I was.
Right.
I don't feel like I really became like an LA comic until Roast Battle kind of took off.
Yeah, that was another thing I wanted to ask you about too. That's how did you fall into that?
I went because I hadn't even heard about it. It was like this sort of underground thing that was like sort of popping, but I was stupid, not paying attention. And then I went because like Connor was doing it, and he was battling a buddy of mine, Steve Hernandez, and I was like, oh, I'll go see what this is about. And I went. And it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen in my life. Yeah. And then they go like, oh, yeah, this is a shitty night because we were in the wrong room and everything was weird. And it was only one battle. Come back the next week. I came back next week and went, oh, shit, I'm in love with this. And so, pretty immediately after that, I was like, well, I got to do one. And Evan Cassidy was my first battle.
Oh, no shit. Yeah. I love Evan. Was that something that you would... known you'd be good at? Like, were you like quick with the insults when you were a kid, or like, I mean,
kinda. I mean, I grew up around like super sharp, funny people, and my mom in particular is very good at like ripping. Like if you're the lady at Starbucks who's fucking everything up, she will make you want to kill yourself in 45 seconds. It's kind of a skill she had when I was a kid. I mean, you know, in my friend group, I kind of was like the quickest one, the ball bust. I never really thought of myself as like a mean dude, which is funny because I've heard people talk, like I've talked about people, like, because that was a long time ago, I've like grown since then,
right? And
I've talked to people from earlier in my life, and they're like, yeah, you weren't really funny that way, you were just like a legitimately shitty person. And now I feel like I'm professionally a dick, and I'm probably the closest thing to a good person I've ever been.
Right.
You know, I mean, good being relative, but like definitely compared to then. And I'm like, oh yeah, and it wasn't mean funny because I was just mean. Yeah, I was stealing from you, so I didn't need to call you gay.
That's funny. I kind of did it back. I'm doing this a little bit backwards.
Yeah, it's all good. We're on a fucking journey, bro.
I normally ask, so like, yeah, tell me a little bit about like where was it that you actually grew up? You grew up in, because I know you moved around a little bit. Too,
I moved around a lot, yeah, but I grew up primarily in Orange County.
Okay,
and then I lived in Florida for a little bit. I lived in Seattle for a little bit with my dad. I bounced around a lot, but Orange County is where I consider like home.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, because your podcast, Mean Boy, and even in your act, you touch on it a little bit. But I mean, what was growing up like for you? I mean, it was kind of a tumultuous thing. I mean, just so people kind of have a sense of.
That's putting it lightly.
Yeah, that's fair.
It was. My mom was, she was a drug addict for most of my childhood. Married kind of a succession of equally shitty, dumb drug addict people. Right. So it was sort of, but she would also she would get sober for a while and then get fall off the wagon. Yeah. So it was just really, there was no baseline for normal. It'd be like literally 1 month we would be living in a motel, fucking eating burritos out of the trash for Thanksgiving dinner, and then the next month we owned a house, and the next month we moved to Florida, and the next month we're in a different shittier motel. Yeah. It was really all over the place. And it was kind of like a weird childhood of like not. All you could really rely on is that you couldn't trust that anything would be okay. Sure. Yeah, so you kind of had to figure out your own shit in your own little orbit and just try and roll with it as much as you could.
Right. And you have brothers, right?
I do. I have two younger brothers on my mom's side, and then two younger brothers and a younger sister on my dad's side.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So you're every your other siblings are half.
Oh yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize
I have 2.5 siblings altogether.
and does that really bring you guys tighter together? Like, do they become your normal, in that type of a tumultuous situation?
Yeah, I mean, the ones, I feel bad because I won't talk about this later, I'm sure, but I don't have a super close relationship with my dad's side of the family as much. But, my brothers on my mom's side, one of them has kind of fucked off and doesn't really want anything to do with the family, but the other one I'm super close with, because it was this weird thing of, like, we didn't really have parents, quote unquote. We had two drunk Nazis running. Well, a drunk Nazi and a half running around. So it was like it was a weird situation. We kind of just had to figure shit out. Right. But we kind of glommed onto each other.
Yeah. And one of because I mean you mentioned it earlier how your mom has been remarried a few times now, 5 times. Yeah. And then the last one you didn't even realize it happened until
my fucking mom, because my mom just moved to Fresno, right. Which my mom is the only person who could be like, I'm moving from LA to Fresno, and I'm like, oh, everything's looking up. You know what I mean? Usually I'm moving from LA to Fresno is some leaving Las Vegas shit. Like you're about to die of vodka-itis. But she moved up here with her, the guy she was dating at the time, a very nice dude, like has a good job, like takes care of her. They have like a house now. And then she just randomly texted me out of the blue, oh, by the way, I got married. I'm like, what? Yeah. She's like, yeah, me and Glenn were on a motorcycle ride through Tahoe and Reno. That's what it was. Yada, yada, yada. We're in this parking structure and he knows a guy and now we're married. So, say hello to your new dad.
It's funny that the only time I've ever seen you get like remotely like irritated with me was the time you were up and your mom came out and she brought her new husband. And I was like, Keith, what do you think of your stepdad? And I probably called him your stepdad like 3 times. And at one point you glared at me and you're like, his name is Glenn.
Well, it was just awkward because it was like I never met the guy.
I was being kind of a dick about it.
No, it was funny. It was super fun. I was kind of like, I was playing up the exasperation for the bit or whatever. But it was just like, it's very weird to meet your mom's new boyfriend when you're also 30.
Sure.
You know what I mean? At least when you're a kid, you're just like, all right, well, there's a frame of reference. I'm just like, okay, I'm an adult man. You're an adult man. Yeah. Enjoy my mother. Like, I don't, what do I do?
Yeah. That's and your podcast, Mean Boys, which I'm a big fan of and I've been listening to you for a very long time. But like, I mean, any Mean Boys fan has heard about your mom, right? Yeah, a whole lot.
They're about to hear a lot more. Literally, after we record this, I'm going to record an episode with my mom,
which is so cool.
Yeah, so if you see a tweet later about Connor being stabbed to death with a screwdriver in a backyard in Fresno, that's what happened.
And how did the mythos of your mom build up in the show? Like, what was?
Well, I mean, it really just was like we would talk like. if you don't listen to Mean Boys, it's it's a kind of a structured comedy thing, and it's we do a lot of written jokes, and we really focus on just being funny as much. It's not really an interviewee show,
right?
But people would bring, like Joe would bring up his kind of upbringing, and Connor would bring up his, and then as I would just bring up like weird stories that were just normal stories to me, they would just react so big. They were just like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And as sort of I unfurled more of it, like the fans became like obsessed with like my mom, because my mom is like a fascinating, has the weird, like if you throw a dart at any point in her life, you would not believe it was the same person.
Yeah,
it's like, okay,
right.
Well, here's when you were a baker at Disneyland. And on your second husband, and then here's where you were, strung out on meth, and here's where you were the head of a homeless shelter, and that was 6 months after. Like,
wow. Is she generally right now? Is she kind of like on an upswing? I mean, she's
she's doing great now. She's been clean for I think like 5 years now.
That's great.
Yeah, and she's she's got a house. She's ready to kind of like chill out.
Yeah. She's a little older now. Seems because I've met her a few times now, and she was a delight. She was.
She's a real. That's the thing. I feel like people assume she is this just toothless, tobacco spitting fucking animal.
Right.
And she was at a point, but she's very chill. Like yesterday we were driving around and we were just sort of talking about like the past and like how crazy our lives were and how like I'm glad she like got calmed down. She just looks at me and she goes, "Yeah, man, I got fucking tired being me." I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. If anybody has earned a fucking nap of the last 40 years of life.
No kidding. Wow. And that's why I'm so excited that you were, when I started this podcast, you were actually one of the first people I thought, like, I really want to have him on, because we've heard so much about your mom and not a lot about your dad, just a couple of jokes in passing if you're a Mean Boys fan. But before we get into the dad stuff, I did want to ask you about Mean Boys. I mean, we've talked a lot about it since you've been up here, but like, what was the origin of that? Because it's become a whole thing now. Like you guys have grown this podcast.
I mean, and the origin of it really was just that Connor and Joe Dosh, who was the original co-host, they wanted to start a thing, and they sort of had the idea of like, what do we do a more scripted podcast? Because as a comedian, like, there's so many podcasts that people start that are just like, well, no, we're just going to sit down and rap about comedy, dog, and we're just going to chat it up. People are going to love that. Yeah. And it's good 0% of the time.
I mean, and it would be an edgy idea if it were 2008,
Yeah, well, it's like a thing of like,
sailed.
I mean, they're like, well, we can just do like what Maron does. And it's like, well, here's the thing. You're not Mark Maron.
Right.
And you're not good at doing the thing. And also, I don't really want to hear a bunch of open micers interview a bunch of open micers, And more importantly, like, if you want to do it, have fun. Whatever makes you make a thing, go make the thing. Even if I think it's stupid, what the fuck do I know?
Yeah, right. At the end of the day.
But it really was just like, I think we all didn't want to do that. And we're like, we like writing. Why don't we write shit?
Yeah.
And they started it. They brought me in, actually, because I knew I was friends with Connor. I didn't really know Joe as well.
Yeah.
And the first few episodes, we recorded like 3 test episodes. And then we just started doing it. We were just kind of like, I don't know if anyone will listen to it, but we'll just do it every week so we have an excuse to write shit and to hang out.
Yeah, right.
And then it just, very gradually just kind of crept up and became, whatever version of a quote-unquote thing it is now.
Yeah, but you guys have this, like, really, like, wonderful, dedicated fan base. And
I mean, that's what really surprised us is, like, people started coming out of the woodwork that were, like, actual Mean Boys fans.
Yeah.
We kind of like scrapped our first, like, from, roast battle people and, This Is Rad and Unpops, like all these other things we had sort of been a part of in some way. But what was crazy to us is that they not only showed up, but they were like weirdly invested. And it's funny because we created a show inherently that would have like an arm's length to it emotionally, where we're like, this is all jokes, this is all written, this is performative. We're not really like getting that like real with you, and yet somehow people really latched onto us like in a personal way. And it's very cool. It's very weird sometimes.
Yeah, well, and
not on them, because like I don't think any of our fans are weird. It's just weird for me because when you know this now because you're sort of how far into comedy are you?
2 years, yeah.
You're 2 years in, so you're at the point now where you know what you're doing. You're very funny.
Yeah, thank you.
But you can feel sort of like you're talking into a void a little bit. It's like I do the show for the audience, then the audience disappears,
right? And
you don't really, if you're not doing shit where there's like immediate feedback or stuff like that, when you're kind of in the gray area, and I had nothing going on when Mean Boys started. It's like, okay, I don't know if anyone gives a shit about any of this, but I'm just going to keep doing it. And when people start being like, no, we do give a shit about it, it's like weirdly overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what that relationship is. Like, I know how to be friends with somebody, I know how to like date somebody, I don't know how to have a fan.
Right.
And I feel like I figured it out as we've kind of gotten more, and we try to we pride ourselves on trying to be cool to the fans as much as we can.
100%. And you and this is, I mean, Tom and I were just talking about it earlier, but like you guys have really managed to speak to kind of like an underserved demographic of comedy fan, I feel like.
We're just trying to appeal directly to the white man. They've been lost in this SJW narrative, and I really think we need to rise up the straight, cis, white, Aryan man and take back what's ours, the internet.
I was gonna go like more like blue collar middle class, but
we do we appeal to a very specific class of, it feels like, sort of scumbag liberals almost. Sure. Where it's people like we have a weirdly thriving community of like transgender listeners, which is so cool to me. On paper, if you listen to what we do, you would think it was all just like Joe Rogan meatheads who liked this show, but I think we have enough of like a different angle on it that we do appeal to sort of a different sect of people. And, not to shit on anybody who likes those things, but I'm just like, we found our people. And I've always told people we have like 5,000 fans, give or take, but they're like people who are ride or die because nothing else is for them in the way we are. So that makes me really fucking happy. And
absolutely.
I'm glad people like it.
And it just feels like so much comedic content that's created right now, especially in the podcast world, is like geared at like the white guy sitting in his cubicle with his earbuds in, working on a spreadsheet.
Right.
Whereas your fan is more. You guys have talked about it before. They're the guys like they have factory jobs.
Yeah. No. We've talked to our fans. And there's so many like factory workers. We have multiple carnies who listen to this show, and then occasionally you'll get like a guy who has like a really. We had somebody who was just like, oh yeah, I work for the government. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Turn this off and go fix everything.
Yeah, but I mean,
it's like, I mean, there's a weird elitism to podcasting, which sucks because inherently what's cool about this medium is the democratic nature of it. Anybody can pick this up. There's no gatekeeper to it. It's hard to get people to listen to it.
Sure.
But it's not like you have to get people to sign off on a TV show. It costs money to make a TV show or a movie or whatever. But a podcast, you can just pick it up, make it exist, and then people can find it. So it should be more of a blue collar kind of Bruce Springsteen-y kind of like power to the people.
Yeah, very punk rock and everything else.
Yeah, but then you get like NPR takes over the concept of podcasting, and it's all just, hello, I'm a soft-spoken white woman here to rehash facts about a cold case. We'll fix nothing, but you will remember that Cherry's Berries exists. Like, and again, if you like these things, good for you. Like, have fun. But I'm just like, it doesn't all have to be that. Sure. Or just welcome to the fucking nootropic kill a deer fucking bro time hour.
Yeah. Well, it was a conversation I had with Kyle Clark when he was talking about like a lot of meetings you tend to go into sometimes. Sometimes it feels like the meeting is with these industry people about doing a thing with them. Sometimes feels more like, how did you do this and how can we make you stop doing this?
Oh, yeah. They're absolutely trying to vacuum out whatever you figured out that they couldn't figure out, do it their way, and then just give you nothing.
Right. That's a scary thing.
It's a weird thing that I both, need the industry to some extent because it is what I do for a living.
Right.
But I also think it's full of vampire. It is inherently a vampire. I think there are really wonderful people who work within this and are trying to sneakily make cool art and do cool things and help people inside of a machine designed to kill.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like a real friendly guy giving you a flower from inside a meat grinder.
Right.
Like, the machine does what it does.
And that is kind of the cool thing about you is you do tend to, I mean, you specifically tend to straddle that line where you're meeting with people that do things in workplaces like Comedy Central, and then at the very same time you're meeting with these very salt of the earth like fans of yours too.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. I want to kind of like see both sides of the thing, and I think there's nothing inherently evil about working for Viacom or whatever. Sure. But I also don't want that to be the brass ring. Like, any legitimate job I get or any legitimate credit or anything, I always think of like, well, how does this like further me being able to do more shit with the podcast and being able to like go out on the road and like meet people who actually give a shit, for whom what I do means anything. It isn't just like content that's like being thrown at them to just fucking consume.
Well, and I think that that really shines through when if you listen to you guys both on the podcast and off air, because
by the way, it's so funny to have this highfalutin conversation, and then you listen to the show, and it's just like, what if 9/11 was a fart? Nah, I'm the fudge lord. It's like, it's asinine bullshit. It is key jingling for the mentally ill.
Yeah, we had to take it.
But we're just like, as an artist, let me put on my fuck shit turtleneck and really pontificate on the meaning of creation.
I remember I was hanging out with a girl where I was driving her back to her place, and I was like, oh, let me show you this podcast, and I put on the Mean Boys, and it was, we hadn't even gotten to the Mexican joke off yet, and I'm just having a great time listening to it, and I look over at her, and she's got this face, she looks at me like I just kicked a dog. Like, just, why would you do this to me?
Dude, we've gotten so many texts from guys who are like, yeah, I tried to show my lady the podcast. Anyway, we fought for several.
But, and so yeah, it is kind of a weird thing to take a high-minded look at, but I think there's some merit and some value.
I talked to one guy who was like, yeah, I showed a girl I was like seeing like the podcast, and then she never like called me again. It was super weird. We've been dating for like 2 months. I thought it was like going somewhere. I was like, well, what part did you show her? It's like, oh, I showed her that sketch about the board game called Don't Get Raped. And I'm like, yeah, how'd you think that was going to pan out, Chief?
But listening to you guys both on air and off air, because I'm friends with you guys, talk about going on tour and meeting your fans. Like, I mean, it's genuinely like the excitement I see in you guys at going out and performing and being with your people.
It's fun, man. It's insane. Because I've done big shows. I've done shows for like 300-400 people or whatever. And it's like, fine, it's fun. But doing a show for 10 people who love what you do is so fucking dope.
Yeah.
No doubt. It's insane. Like, it is the most fulfilling thing I've ever gotten to do. And I feel like I've already won, like in comedy, because I'm able to do that. Yeah. So everything else is just kind of gravy, and hopefully it'll pay my rent.
Oh, that's great, man. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, well, we've been. Oh yeah, we hit the mark. I tried to do about 20 minutes or 28 minutes of getting to know my guests before we jump into the dad stuff.
That's some damn fine broadcast.
Yeah, man.
Now it's time for the Mexican dad off. It's so weird doing a podcast that is just like a conversation.
Yeah.
Because I mean, our thing is just like, well, we have to like rush to the 40-minute mark, so we can put in the sketch about that one time I threw a dog at a lady. Like,
yeah, I try to keep some structure to it. Like I've mentioned this before. I've learned over the course of doing the podcast. They're really only very broadly speaking, and this goes for moms too, but there's only 4 types of dads. Okay. There's good dad, bad dad, absent dad, and dead dad. And
I guess dead dad and absent dad technically.
And I mean, and they cross-pollinate, like a good dad can fluctuate into a bad dad or an absent dad, or somebody's dad could die, but like usually once I kind of have a sense of which category the dad falls in, I kind of have like a line of questioning in the back of my mind. But I forget how we got on that whole. Oh yeah, it was a very loose structure. So, but yeah, you're Keith Carey.
I am.
You were Keith Carey, and
I'm here to say that I love rapping in a rabbity way.
And this is a podcast where we talk about dads, and you have a dad.
I do.
And where did your dad grow up?
My dad grew up in Seattle, which is actually where I'm originally from.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, he grew up in, I think, Bellevue, Washington, which is a little ways out of Seattle.
Yeah. Have you been to Bellevue before?
I have, yeah. They used to have a real big house out there, and I used to... So, like, I guess I'm just going... My timeline gets all twisty.
Sure.
But my dad and my mom got together when she was, I think, like 18, 19. She had me when she was 19.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was born, I was up there, and I spent a lot of time with my dad at that point, and then they broke up when I was like 3.
Sure.
And then like a year later, me and my mom moved to California. And from there, it was very like sporadic how often I would see my dad.
Sure. Well, and what kind of a town is that? Is it like a...
It's the burbs.
It's the burbs?
Yeah, it's the suburbs outside of Seattle. Like,
there's no big factory looming over the town.
It's very quiet, kind of like it's really beautiful, honestly. Yeah, it's like the kind of place where when they lived there was just sort of like a nice middle class town, where now it would be like $1 million home, like that kind of thing. Yeah.
And what kind of kid was your dad? Was he?
I honestly don't know that much. I don't really know much about my dad until like right around where I come in.
Sure.
Because as a teenager, he got really into music, and he was in a band.
Was he?
Yeah, he was actually in a few bands. He was around a lot in like that Seattle grunge scene. Like he knew Kurt Cobain, and he was like part of that whole thing. In fact, one of the weirdest things I've ever seen is, so my dad was in bands for a long time. It never really kind of like took off, and he still plays in bands. He's a fucking amazing musician.
Is he really?
Yeah, he's like one of those weird sort of like Frank Zappa-y kind of like really into like complex Rush ass like putting shit together. But he's really, really good.
Is he a guitar player?
He plays guitar, he plays bass, he plays everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has this little recording. He lives in like a town of like 800 people now. And he has this little like shack in his backyard that's his recording studio, which is like all these rusty ass instruments, and then like a computer that is still running Windows 95.
Wow.
I don't know how he's doing anything on it.
And what I mean, have you met his parents, your grandparents?
I have, yeah. They were like a big part of my life when I was younger.
Really?
And I still talk to them, here and there, but it's pretty rare at this point.
What are they like? Are they real?
They're my grandma was they're both still alive. Super religious, but not in a weird, shitty, like bad guy from an '80s movie kind of way. She was like the head of the choir at her church and like an elder there, but like also like very warm, very like a family grandma who wants everybody in the family over and wants to fucking feed everybody, and really gets off is the wrong term, but like really gets stoked on like having a big ass family and being like the head of this like pyramid,
right?
And then my grandpa's a weird deal because it's like I only know him from being my grandpa, and he's just been like fat and sick. He's just one of those dudes who's just like had a different weird medical ailment since forever. Like he's been dying for 30 years.
That's so funny.
Like everyone's just like, is he going to be okay? And then like, yeah, he's fine. He's the most resilient. He's like a fucking tortoise. Where like he's going to move very slow, but he's going to be around. Like, and every time I get like my yearly email with the family update, it's just like, oh, everything's going well. We installed an artificial morphine drip into Grandpa Don's heart, and I'm like, oh, tight. Well, he's a fucking drug robot. He's more. And then I see him, and he's just like, I'm still sluggish.
Is that the Samoan side of your family?
Yeah, and that's the fucked up thing is, and I hear stories from when he was a kid. He like played football and was like a contractor and like was like traveling America on a train. And like you see pictures and he was like jacked, and it's really weird.
That is weird.
It's weird to think of like old ass people as once like vibrant young. Like removing the familial element, it's really weird to like look at like a kindly old man and be like, oh man, you dropped dick hard on somebody.
You were fucking hammering it.
Yeah,
bro.
you were like at like the bar and like chicks were like, I'm creaming.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like a bizarre
soaking right through their panties onto the bar stool. And
I showed a picture of him to my girlfriend, and my girlfriend was like, "Oh shit!" And I'm like, "Hey, he just looks like hotter me."
Okay, give me the picture back now.
Yeah, I was like, "Don't soak my heirloom, you fucking mongrel."
That's funny. And so your dad's growing up out there in Washington. He's playing in and out of punk bands or not punk bands, but grunge bands.
Punk bands. He was in a lot of different kind of bands.
That's great.
Yeah, if anybody's listening wants to check out this band called the Queen Anne's, just put their whole back catalog on Spotify.
Oh, no shit.
It was a real cool like power pop band from like the late 80s.
Oh, hell yeah.
But yeah, one of the weirdest things I ever saw, I was telling the story and I got distracted, but they have this thing in Seattle called the Experience Music Project, and it's like this big like museum for music, and when it opened, like we went because it was like kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And they had this like audio tour thing where you could like point it at any exhibit in the museum and it would like tell you a little something about it.
Oh, that's cool.
And I remember I'm on like one side of this room and I see him like point the thing and I see him like listening to something, and then I see him just look really like sad and overwhelmed and just kind of walk away, and I go over and there's a record from one of his bands in the case.
Whoa.
And I click on it and it's basically the guy like saying like, the Refusers were like a really good band, but like kind of got lost in the wake of Nirvana and never really found their audience and just kind of disappeared into obscurity. And I'm like, fuck, dude.
Man.
Like, there's like, and like, I was a kid when this happened, but the more I think about it, the more haunting it is, the idea of somebody literally building a museum to you not making it as an artist.
Yeah.
Is like the gnarliest shit I can imagine.
That is rough. Like, like I'm obscurity. Like, that's like, I am obscurity incarnate. Like, this is
and it's like, and I go to, because that weird thing nobody tells you when you just said you're going to be a cool art guy is like a bunch of you aren't going to make it.
Yeah.
And you're not even going to fail spectacularly. You're just going to like be really good and be good enough to have made it, and it's just not going to work for XYZ reason.
Fucking fade away. Yeah. That's Yeah, but it's the whole burnout, not fade away type of thing. But yeah, that's that's really intense. And so like he's playing in these bands. He's and then he meets your mom. And at what point do you come along almost immediately in that story?
I think they'd been dating for like maybe a year or so before I was born. And then they weren't married or nothing. It was just kind of a whoopsie daisy pregnancy.
Sure.
And the story of my birth is pretty fun.
Oh yeah,
because I was born super late. Like, I wouldn't come out, and like I was born half paralyzed, and they had to like pull me out with like force. I still have a scar on my forehead from where they had to like yank me out.
Wow.
Yeah, it was all fucked up.
Yeah.
But the story is it's been told to me by my mom, and my dad has never confirmed this, but I think it's true because it makes sense with everything else I know about him. So my mom has me. My dad is on it, like trying to get there desperately. He's like at work or at a gig or something. My mom passes out. My mom had planned to name me Elliot.
Okay.
My dad shows up on a skateboard with a bag of mushrooms in his pocket, walks in, and while my mom is asleep, names me Keith Richards.
That's so funny. Is that your middle name?
That's my middle name.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge asshole.
Holy shit. That is so funny. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a bit of Keith trivia. I was not
Yeah, no, when I started comedy, I was going by Keith Richards Carey.
Did you?
And then I realized, no one's ever going to be able to Google me. And also, that sucks.
Oh, wow. And so where did when and how did the wheels kind of start falling off for your mom and dad?
I don't honestly know a ton about that. I have a weird relationship with my dad because it's not so much with him, but just with the legacy of my dad. Because I lived with my mom for almost all of my childhood. There was one like pocket where I went and lived with my dad for like a year. But she, between the fact that she had some, I think, bitterness about the way some shit went down and the fact that she was, looped out on drugs and, drug people, they kind of like turn themselves into the eternal victim of every story.
Yeah, the ultimate martyr. Yeah.
So she would tell me this stuff that was like, this weird timeline of events about how like my dad, pushed her out into the rain and made her go be homeless and never did anything and never tried to talk to me. Yeah. And then I would find out later from both of them, but especially my dad, where it's like, that was all bullshit. Like, and he kind of gave me the closest he could to the real version, which is, they broke up for whatever reason. I think the reason they broke up is because, she was 19, he was 22. They didn't know what the fuck they were doing.
So young. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, it was real early going. But, yeah, so it's weird. It's been weird, like later in my life, trying to piece together the truth of what any of that was.
Right. Are you the oldest of like your siblings?
Yeah, I'm the oldest on all sides. Yeah.
Yeah. I always thought you had an older brother for some reason.
No.
No. And so, what does your dad do for like a day job?
He doesn't. I don't think he works a ton right now. He does like occasional like contracting work and like freelance stuff, but I think he's more of like stay-at-home dad.
Sure.
Because he's got,
because he's got a whole...
Well, they're older now. Like, two of them are off in college. One of them just graduated from high school.
Oh, wow.
But, and his wife, I think, is like a medical... She's like a nurse or a nurse assistant, something like that.
Sure.
Yeah, his wife, we met after my mom, who I guess was a stripper in Arizona.
Whoa.
And then he was in Arizona, met her, they immediately got married, and then they just drove back to Seattle, and now they just have a house full of lizards and weird children. And honestly, like, knowing how because my dad is like, he's not a hippie, but he's like very much a dude who's just like way more he's like a weird, like, gutter intellectual. He's like Alan Moore if Alan Moore never made any money.
Oh, funny.
Like, he's that kind of level where he's just like, I've read every book and I can quote episodes of Nova, but I don't know that I totally know how to do a tax return. That kind of thing.
W-2, you say?
Yeah. And my mom, or my stepmom, his wife, is like very much like kind of a practical, grounded. Like, she's very hippy dippy, but she's also like, all right, well, I'll get everything done and I'll be the grown up.
Sure.
And they work out very well. Whereas I think my mom and my dad would have murdered each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was a straight up Batman orphan.
And for those kids, I mean, was it a relatively like stable upbringing? I mean, I know it sounds like they were kind of like the weird parents on the block, but I mean,
they were more quirky than like weird in the way like my upbringing was weird.
Sure.
But it seemed like, I only had kind of sporadic, I would go up like maybe once a year. I lived there for a year when I was like 7, 8. Mm-hmm. But it really seemed like, they kind of had more stability to it. They lived in like 2 places their whole life. They lived in like the big place and then they moved to this little tiny town. Yeah. But it did seem like they kind of had more of if nothing else, their parents were just married the whole time,
right? If nothing else,
and never got divorced. Yeah.
And what were your feelings on that? Like, kind of being on the outside looking in. Like, I mean, it's sort of this so close to like a normal stable family unit, but so far away type. I mean, was there?
Yeah, it was definitely a weird. Like I always felt like an outsider in that side of the family, and it's not their fault. Like, because they all really want, even my aunts and my my grandparents on that side, and everybody. They really like me, and I like them, and they really love me and like consider me part of the family. And I always felt sort of a step removed from it because I was like, well, I did my own thing over here.
Yeah.
And at the time as a kid, I was sort of like, hey, fuck you guys, because no one saved me from everything that happened.
Right.
And they tried. Like when I was 7, the reason I went to live with my mom was all thwacked on heroin.
Yeah.
And I went to visit my dad, and my dad basically was like, okay, well, you're not gonna go back because that's insane.
Yeah.
So he technically kidnapped me, and then got CPS involved, and there was a huge custody battle with
So he did try.
What's up?
Oh, so he did try.
Yeah, no, he really did.
Yeah.
And it's like a thing where as a kid I didn't totally know all that, but knowing it now as I've gotten older, I'm like, I feel bad because I feel like he tried more than I gave him credit for, and my mom would just not give him the phone number and would kind of keep him distanced or whatever. And it was weird because as a kid, you sort of build up this resentment towards this person and this narrative, and you get to adulthood and you learn the truth of it, but it doesn't undo those pathways in your brain for how you think about your dad.
These grooves are so deep at this point. Yeah.
So it's a weird thing where I still have a weird lizard brain resentment towards him that's not even based in truth.
Sure.
And that's it's a weird, hard thing to shake off.
No
I
doubt.
don't really know what to do with it.
And just at least from my perspective, looking at it as a father, that had to be pretty heartbreaking for him too.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I mean when we basically I went up there 3 or 4 years ago, and I got hammered drunk with my dad, which I had never done before. Way too dry. I ended up throwing up all over his front yard. It was snowing, so it froze into puke icicles. And it was so funny because I thought I was discreet and hid it. And literally the next day after I left, he texted me. He was like, "Yeah, I found all the vomit." He's like, "Don't worry, man, it happened."
Oh, that's so funny.
But it was, he definitely was sort of he had a lot of regrets about it too, and a lot of he felt guilty about it. And it was weird hearing that because I always thought of him as this dude who didn't really give a shit and kind of had his own. I was the first pancake of a family, and then he went and kind of figured it out later.
Sure.
And knowing that he was sort of dealing with that same feeling of weird separation.
Right.
And now it's funny because I just saw him recently. I went up to Seattle with Connor. We were doing shows, and we stayed at his house.
Yeah.
And it's just, I like him a lot. He's a nice guy, but it's this weird. It's hard for me to think of that's my dad.
Yeah.
That's my father.
That's my dad. Yeah.
Yeah. It's this weird thing of I don't really feel any paternal thing. He's just a cool dude I like hanging out with.
Sure.
We talk about how Sammy Hagar's a fag. That's a lot of our past few hang sessions have been mostly that.
Yeah. Oh, that's wild. And so there was that year you had with him, though.
Yeah.
I mean, do you feel like you got a good glimpse of what it could have been in that time?
I did, yeah. I feel, that was so tricky because it was I didn't want to be there as a kid because my mom had, sort of poisoned me on my dad. Mm-hmm. And then, whenever I would see her, because I would get these sort of court supervised visits or whatever, it was very much framed by her as sort of, I'm going to get you back. You've been taken captive. Mm-hmm. And even though it didn't feel like that, they were fucking great to me. It was, the closest thing to a stable life I had at that point. Mm-hmm. It still was weird in my brain because I'm well, I know this asshole, and she is the asshole who's in charge.
Right. So
she's telling me that this dude is the bad guy, so fuck this guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But in reality, it was really nice, and I wish I hate to say I wish I could have leaned in more and wanted to stay there.
Yeah.
But you don't want to. I always hate the idea of wanting to change things because I feel a lot of where I came from is how I ended up who I am.
Right.
I do remember there was a point maybe 6 months, a year after that happened where I told my mom I wanted to move back with my dad, and my dad said no.
Really?
And I still don't know. I'm sure there's a lot of moving parts to it.
Sure.
But I do know that was that. I have never thought about this articulated until right now. But I think that was the moment where the wall was pretty much solidified.
Yeah.
You know, it was like I actually, like, that was the one time I really sort of made an active effort to try and be like, hey, I want to be part of this family.
Right.
And, you know, for whatever reason, he didn't let me.
Sure.
And I'm sure that wasn't all just him saying no, you know.
Well, I mean,
I'm sure it was also my mom didn't want me to go, and there were probably legal things. And he's also got, you know, other kids he's dealing with.
I mean, it's, you know, obviously it's impossible to speculate, especially with people I don't know. But,
right.
I mean, there also kind of had to be a little bit of, like, I mean, I imagine it had to have been a gut-wrenching experience to have you, like, ripped away from him.
Right.
And, like, to think about going through that again, that could have been it, too, you know? I mean, I don't know. Who knows? I mean, yeah, it's... have your mom and dad talked, like, at all?
Not really.
Yeah.
I can't think of the last time they talked to each other. It would have been when I was a kid.
Sure.
Like, maybe, like, end of high school. But
yeah,
they... they really haven't had much interaction since all that business went down.
Right.
I've talked to both of them about the other one, and they both seem to have the same sort of mindset on it, which is like, you know, we went through a lot of heavy shit. We were real shitty to each other, but also, like, we were figuring it out, and it was weird, and we were young, and, like, I don't resent... Like, my mom, even the other day, we were just going through the Rolodex of her ex-husbands, and she's like, your dad was the only one who I don't think was a bad dude.
Really?
Yeah, he was a dumbass. He was like a kid who was in over his head, and he was a real fucking tard, but he wasn't like a villainous dude at any point. He never wanted to hurt somebody.
Sure.
He was never trying to make anyone's life shittier.
Right,
he just made weird choices because he couldn't quite figure it out.
Yeah. Was there I was just thinking about this too, because I mean, it's like, yeah, you had this shitty experience, but then you were, I mean, were your younger siblings also experiencing shitty situations of their own, like with their dad?
You mean on my dad's side?
Well, no, on your mom's side.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, none of us got it. I mean, look, I'll just give you I'll give you the Cliff Notes Rolodex of my mom's relationship history. So she broke up with my dad, married some guy in Seattle who, like, I think was like way older, and like she just sort of panicked and wanted to like marry somebody, which ended up with like a crazy abusive situation where she ended up leaving him by jumping out of his moving car and running through a cornfield to get away from him.
Holy shit!
Yeah. Then she moved to California. Then she married the pro skater / tweaker.
Wow.
Yeah, then she divorced him to marry the Nazi. And then she divorced him to marry the just garden variety racist. In between, she dated a homeless crackhead and a bunch of other guys. Now she's married to like a social worker who's like a really cool dude.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, like, you know, it wasn't like we had a lot of great dads going on here. And, you know, me and my brothers all have different dads on my mom's side. Right. So they all had their own.
Yeah, because they all have their own, like, dad story to tell.
Well, one of the weird ones, too, is so my middle brother, Topper, his dad was the skater guy. And that was when I was, like, you know, like from like 5 to like 8 is like when he was around.
Yeah.
And it was weird because, like, to me, that was my dad. Like, that was, you know, my dad wasn't really my dad because he was around for, you know, about the same amount of time, but it was like I was a baby. Like, I don't really have any memory of that.
Sure.
Versus, like, this dude I thought of as like my dad.
Yeah.
And then, like, he took off, like, they got divorced or whatever. And then he made like these really active efforts for a while, at least, to try and like keep seeing like his kid and whatever. But didn't really want anything to do with me. Like, would never, like, didn't take me for the weekend. Didn't really, like, you know, we were always just, like, distant. And I felt super shitty about it because I was just like, I know I didn't come out of your dick, but, like, you were my dad. Like, you know, you don't just get to pick the one that's yours. Like,
right. Oh, that's hard. Dude.
Yeah, like, I weirdly am angrier at him than I'll ever be at my dad.
No shit.
Because my dad, I'm like, you know, shit happens. Like, and it's, you know, it's a lot of stuff. But that dude, I'm like, you were around and you did the right thing for one kid.
Right.
At least kind of. He also was a fuck up. But, you know, he at least made the effort. And then for me, you were just like, fucking whatever, dude. Hang out with your mom.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, man. That's pretty intense. Thank you so much for like being so open about it.
Yeah, man. Like, it's, you know, it's. I figured this was going to be a deep hang.
Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, we went hard. But this is the part of the show where I normally ask for a dadictote, and I know you said you had a good one in the chamber.
Yeah, my dad made me laugh the hardest I've ever laughed in my life. I remember this is one of the few memories I have from my childhood that's like a really positive one. I was it was when I was living up there.
Yeah,
and I was getting ready to go to bed, and he was like, sort of, you know, putting me to bed, tucking me in or whatever, and he just goes, "Hey, poop." He just said the word poop, apropos of nothing, and I laughed harder. Like, it was like the first time I remember that laugh where you feel like your body has been electrocuted. You're like a car that the transmission dropped out of, and then he just. It never stopped working. He just like poop, and then he would laughed. He would turn the lights off, and then just like waited like 45 seconds, and just poop. And to this day, I don't know why that was so fucking funny to me.
Hilarious.
But it fucking destroyed me, man.
Oh, man. Yeah, we nailed it, dude. That was a fucking great session.
Yeah, man.
Can you tell the people where to find me if they want more Keith Carey in their life?
Yeah, if you like this shit, follow me on all the social media. I'm at Keith Tells Jokes, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can also listen to the Mean Boys podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, fucking everywhere. Go to meanboyspodcast.com, and if you like our shit, we have merch for sale. You can also fill out a thing to have us come on tour through your neighborhood. We're planning our next tour right now. Other than that, that's pretty much it.
Keith Carey, you've been so awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man, this is fun.
Yeah.
Fuck everything. Dad is dead. Cut that out.
And we're back. Keith Carey. It was great, right? It was a journey. I feel like I learned a lot. I learned a ton, actually. I thought I had I actually got a little emotional at certain parts when he was kind of talking about his dad kind of having to surrender him back to his mom. Like, I was kind of like holding it back, holding it in. I don't know. Yeah, just kind of, for me, the dad perspective on that situation seems really heartbreaking because his dad seems like a really good dude. And I can only imagine what that must have been like. So a big old thank you to Keith for coming in and just telling me about your dad, man. It was great. Just a couple things. If you guys have a dadictote you want to send to me, I'll read it on the air. You can send that to saddadpodcast@gmail.com. And you can also, if you could rate and review on iTunes, that'd be great. If you've migrated over from the Mean Boys podcast because you're a Keith fan, check out my backlog. I've got a great episode with Tom Goss, a really fun one with Ramsey Badawi and Kyle Clark's a great episode too. If you want to find out about those guys' dads, they're all regulars on the Mean Boys podcast. Joe Kay, talk about his dad. He's been on the Mean Boys. Brandy Posey's been on Mean Boys. That's episode 3. You can check that out. So, guys, thanks so much. This is, I think, the last. I think I have one more Sad Dad in 2018 next week, next Thursday coming out for you. But this is the last one before Christmas. So, Merry Christmas, if that's your jam. Oh man, guys. Okay, can you keep a secret? My daughter Abigail, her mom is getting her a Nintendo Switch for Christmas. I've never been so jealous of my own kid. I also realized that the Nintendo Switch is like the perfect game console for children of divorce. Because it's totally portable. It just gets back and forth from mom's house to dad's house to grandma's house. So anyway, cool guys. Thanks again. Merry Christmas and adios.